Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast, career advice from people in the business. This week I chatted to children's TV producer-director Matt Rene. Matt's worked on massive shows like Teletubbies, Topsy and Tim, Bear Behaving Badly, and the recent BAFTA-winning Apple TV show Lovely Little Farm. Matt's also worked as a producer on Celebrity Big Brother. Matt worked his way up to where he is today from starting out as a runner. So if you're thinking of taking the same career path, this is a real eye-opener. He also gives me some great tips on working with kids and animals and handling the pressure of big television productions. Enjoy. So I did a bit of research on you online, but the thing I couldn't find, or the thing I wanted to know was, did you study film at all at uni, or did you go straight into it?
No, I went straight into it. So what happened was I wanted to, and I applied. Well, long story short, I got into the London Institute, as it was then, onto a marketing and advertising course,
right,
through clearing, because I wanted to move on to their film course, and was told through some people, oh, you get in and you just go over there and knock on their door and they'll let you in. So day one or day two, I went over, knocked on their door, and unsurprisingly, they sort of went, well, you might be able to get on, but you'll have to apply like everyone else next year. So I was like, oh, right, okay, maybe this wasn't the right thing to do. And then I knew I wanted to work in TV. And then I saw advertised in a paper, or it was probably the Media Guardian, or something like that, a runner job at the BBC for BBC Resources, as it was then. So I applied for that to do part-time. They wanted a part-time runner to do the weekends. So I thought that was perfect. It would fit in with doing a degree. So I went there, got that job to do Saturdays and Sundays, and met some of the other runners there, and realized that they had all recently graduated and were doing that job. And so I sort of thought, well, I could wait a year, apply to a degree I want to do, and then do 3 years of that degree, but then I'll just be joining this job that I'm doing now in 4 years' time. So I quit my degree and I just went and worked at the BBC.
Wowzers. So that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because you've managed to sort of skip that degree part, and you've done what I guess when I was at uni, a lot of people said, oh, you get a job as a runner and work your way up. So is that essentially it? You got that runner job and then slowly went up through
Absolutely, yeah. So I was very happy. I mean, it worked very well for me. I was lucky that I didn't have any contacts in the industry. I didn't know anyone who worked in TV or anything like that. So I was very lucky to get that job. It sort of came up at the right time. They were looking for people to do weekend work. I was looking for weekend work. It actually took a bit of time. When I did quit and said, right, I want to do this full time, they actually said, well, we don't have full-time work for you. Because we only ever wanted you in at weekends. So it was a bit tricky at first. I did have to sort of do a bit of other work and whatever for about sort of 3 to 6 months while I waited for, to show that I was keen, and then I was able to go more full time. Yeah. It was a 0 hours contract type thing. But yeah, I was lucky really, because no one else I was working with at the time had done that. They'd all got degrees, and that was what I was thinking I'd do.
Would you say, so where you are now, does that still happen now? Do they still put calls out for runners and people start and work their way up, or is it a different system?
No, I mean, I don't know. I think that 90% of at least 90% of the runners I've worked with since then have all just graduated. They're all recent graduates. It definitely seems to be by far and away the most common way of doing it. But depending on what role you're interested in, I don't think necessarily that is crucial. Certainly, with technical, if you wanted to go into cinematography, I would say that 3 years working, in the kit room and helping and all that sort of thing is going to be just as useful. But writing, script editing, things like that. I don't know. It would be different. So yeah, I don't think there's necessarily a right answer.
Yeah.
I think each individual, it worked for me, and I don't regret the route I took. And I would encourage plenty of people to consider, if they are really, if they know what area they want to get into, I think there is a good case for getting out there early and trying it. But I can imagine, having not done a degree in filmmaking or TV or media, it's a brilliant way of getting to understand different departments a bit more. If you've got a sort of general feeling, I want to work in this area, but I'm not sure if it's live TV or if it's, a filmmaking, or, going into sort of videography and sort of branded content, all those different things, I would imagine doing a course would be really beneficial.
And what is being a runner like? What are your memories of that? How is it? Is it brutal? Is it, what do you remember?
I loved it. Because, well, one, because it was at BBC Television Centre, and I started as a runner at the weekends in the edit suites, and I wasn't interested in post-production at the time. I was interested in being on the studio floor. So I was desperate to get down into the studio floor, and eventually sort of got there. But I loved it. It was probably because I was, 19, 20, and it was, my first proper job, and, I was actually getting paid to do something that was really fun. So I loved it. I think it's a really great way to learn. I think the higher up you go, the best people I've worked with have all been runners. I think it's
yeah,
definitely, because it's such a great way to understand the process of how things are made, but also really appreciate good management, people skills, because you are the person that people will the easiest person that people can talk down to. And so it's a really great way to see, when someone is treats you with respect, or brings you in, or teaches you something, or just as a runner, it's fantastic, and you remember that. I guess it's a bit like everyone says about, everyone remembers a great teacher, and the same is true with, I think, when you're a runner. And I certainly never forgot those things, and then sort of try and remember those when you're sort of climbing up as well. I think it's really, really helpful, really beneficial to do it.
Oh, that's interesting. And what sort of shows were you working on when you were a runner?
So it was on this. It was great. I got to sort of be a studio runner on all sorts of things, like occasionally things like Top of the Pops, or it would be chat shows. I did a lot of, at the time, Johnny Vaughan was doing a lot of chat shows for the BBC, so I did a lot of those. Only Fools and Horses was being filmed. Yeah, so I got to be a runner on that for a bit. Pints of lager and a packet of crisps was being shot there. Got to be around that. Election night, doing, sort of picking up politicians and people and bringing them up to the studio. Question time, used to love doing that. Get the questions from the audience and bring it into the producers. So yeah, loads of real sort of, big BBC shows. It was really good. It was great fun.
That must have blown your mind, going into that job and being on all those different sets and all that. That sounds amazing, especially as a young person. It's kind of,
it was like a dream. It was a total dream. It was a total. I cannot believe how lucky I was to get that. It was a brilliant introduction. I loved, at the time, I loved live TV. That's what I wanted to work on, and a lot of the shows I was working on were live. So in that way, it was just brilliant. I remember the first day I was being shown around, and we were walking up to the stage door at TV Centre, and Vanessa Feltz had just arrived.
Yeah.
And it was the first celebrity I saw, and I was absolutely starstruck. I was like, "Whoa, look, that's Vanessa Feltz!" And they all turned to me as if I was, completely mad, and realised about 2 weeks in, that seeing the likes of Vanessa Feltz there was not really the pinnacle. You're going to see many more, much bigger stars, but I'll always remember that one.
Yes, that reminds me. I had a similar experience where I was with an ITV producer, and I saw Sid. I'm trying to think of his name. Ricky Butcher. Sid Owen, is it? The guy who plays Ricky. Yeah, on EastEnders. And I was like, oh my God, it's Ricky Butcher. I think that's the character's name. But the guy is an ITV producer, so he's obviously and kind of thing. But at the time, when you're younger, you're kind of, it's him off the telly. This is incredible. He's here. And he's also he's in a working environment, and I'm in that working environment. Isn't that nuts?
Exactly. Yeah.
Exciting stuff.
Like that. Yeah.
So jumping ahead a bit, I've looked through your CV. I've got edit producer on Bear Behaving Badly. Can you explain for those who don't know, what is an edit producer? What does that role entail?
So an edit producing is one of my favorite roles out there. It's basically essentially the creative part of the post-production process. So a show will get shot, usually so the director and the producers will shoot the program. It will go into the edit and be assembled there by the editor. And then as edit producer, you're in on that edit. Sometimes you're in on multiple edits. There might be 2 or 3 running at the same time. And you're there to sort of help steer it and make sure it comes together as it should. On something like Bear Behaving Badly was a children's sitcom. And so with that, you're basically putting it together according to what was shot on the day with a script in mind. So there's not that much. You can't stray too far away from the script, but you need to make sure that we're using the right takes on the day. The intention was to jump from take 1 here, then the joke on take 3 landed best. So let's find a way to go from take 1 to take 3, and you'll sort of help with that. And it's usually on scripted shows it's a bit more straightforward. When you're on unscripted shows, when you're on factual entertainment shows, or those types of programs, the producer director will be out in the field shooting content. They might just be rolling for 2 hours on an event that's taking place, and then you've got all that footage and not such a clear outcome. You've got to what roughly happened in those 3 hours, and we know where we need to get to, but we don't know the best way to structure it. Usually it might be linear, taking the best bits of those 3 hours in the right in time order, but actually to make those beats land, it might be better to take a moment that happened 20 minutes in and bring it forward, and then so moving it around a bit, really sort of ramp up the tension or the drama, and then it's much more creative, much more interesting. You're writing voiceover, and you're finding music to help it. You're doing much more on an unscripted show in the edit as an edit producer than you are on a scripted show, and it's great fun. I think it's really fun.
So it all comes to you're in with an editor, you put it all together, then it goes back to producer director, does it, and they give it the final thumbs up?
Quite often as a director you'll go in and edit produce, not always. So you will offer, you will get as a director, you probably will get a pass on it, but because you're probably edit producing it. But then sometimes on shows you're not. You're going out, you're filming the content, and then it's going into the edit. The edit producer's having a go. Then it's going to the series producer or the exec producer of the in the production team. They're getting a say. You're getting another, you're recutting or adjusting based on their notes, and then it will go to the broadcaster or the client, whoever that is. They'll have a watch. They'll give you notes. You'll then implement those notes, and then they'll probably have another viewing before you then picture lock it.
Yeah.
At that point.
So obviously you've done producing, but what point did the directing stuff come in? Where were you, and how did you kind of move into that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I really like live TV. That's what I wanted to get into, and I sort of did a lot of live TV for a while, and then I started doing a few other bits and pieces, and one bit that came in was producing and directing the VT inserts for the Teletubbies. So the Teletubby tummies light up and you go in and the kids doing stuff. So it was doing that, and I thought, oh, okay, yeah, that could be, I'll do that. That seems, all right. It could be interesting. And it was definitely the hardest job I've ever done. And still is, by far the hardest job I've ever done. And so I did those, and then from that, working with 3-year-old children, trying to get performances from them, and it was hard. But from that, the company I was working for asked if I'd be interested in, I think because they could see the way I was getting performances from children was quite interesting, and they said, would I be interested in directing a couple of full episodes of Teletubbies? And it's not hadn't been something I'd thought about up to that point, but it sort of came at the right time. I'd sort of got a bit bored of live TV, and felt quite samey. So I thought, yeah, that'd be a really interesting challenge. So I did that and loved it, and then from that, I've been moving more and more into directing scripted shows from there, really.
And Teletubbies, a huge sort of iconic TV show, and it's you kind of, it wasn't a reboot, it was like a refresh, was it? Or
yeah, I mean, it was sort of, I think they call it a reboot. It was but basically the Teletubbies hadn't been made for about 20 years. So all the previous episodes were in SD. They weren't 16:9. It was all sort of looking quite dated. So the company that owned the rights to Teletubbies wanted to make it, refresh it, and they considered lots of options. They considered making it CG animation, all sorts of things. And in the end, they went with an idea of, well, a bit of both. It was the Teletubbies were live action. Where they lived was largely live action. There was a bit of model, and there was quite a bit of CG work. And so it was refresh. It was a reboot, but all the voices were new. The people inside the Teletubbies were all new. But the script, some of the scripts were similar, were the same or similar, and the themes were similar.
With that, is there a Teletubby Bible? Is there like this can happen, this can't? How does that work? Is there somebody in charge? I mean, I don't even know. Is there like a creator of Teletubbies, or how's that work?
So the original creator wasn't involved. So the original creators sold the idea to a company called Wild Brain, and then so Wild Brain had the rights. They then put it out and approached a company called Darryl McQueen to sort of make it for them. So there was, I mean, I think every episode was written by the same person. So so it had a clear and a clear voice in that way. There were lots of educational consultants, and there was lots of, I mean, every line was carefully considered and scrutinized, and what the actions were, and everything, even in the VTs working with the kids, the ideas that we were working on then had to go to a educational consultant. They would then so that everything had a, an educational merit to it.
Yeah. And I saw a clip, I think a VFX thing, where you had some blue screen, so them on a blue screen set. So is it predominantly that, or did they have sets they were in?
Yeah, so anytime the Teletubbies are outside in Teletubby Land,
Yeah.
that was shot in a big soundstage with a big blue screen.
Yeah.
And it was really complicated because their Teletubby Land was a model made with thousands of tiny flowers that you could hardly see with the naked eye. You'd have to sort of look with a magnifying glass, dotted around, and all the Teletubby hills and all that were built on this beautiful model. And a probe lens would sort of travel across the Teletubby Land, and you'd choose an area of Teletubby Land where the Teletubbies would where you wanted your scene, and the probe lens would shoot that scene with a little tiny mound, and then you would bring in you times that mound by whatever 100, and you bring in a blue mound and place it in the studio so that the Teletubbies would interact in this world, in your blue world, exactly the right size to what you've shot on the model. So that's how you shoot the exteriors, but the interiors were real. So we built the big interior of the house with beds and everything else, and that was real.
And you did over 20 episodes of that. So does that by the end of it, do you feel like you're living in Teletubby Land, or does it?
Yeah. So I can't remember how. There was lots of episodes over a couple of years. I wasn't the main director on it. The main director, I can't remember how many episodes he did, but he would have definitely lived. He would have definitely lived it for a couple of years for sure. I mean, it was a big part of my life for, I'd say, 2 years when I was working on the VTs and doing the main show. It was a big part of my life, I think, for probably about 2 years. And it was pretty intense. And really intense for the performers. And I remember that was probably the biggest challenge when I was coming on. I was coming on to direct a show, midway through the run, when everyone's getting a bit tired of it. The performers having to say "uh-oh" again, 80th time that day, and the crew have seen it all before, and it's we're not quite at the end of the run where it's exciting again. We've got through the beginning bit, and that was actually the hardest bit, and it quite often is when you're working on a long-running show. Coming in on the set is to sort of give everyone a lift and get the enthusiasm back up.
I get that on when we do a film shoot. You get the mid dip where everyone's kind of, I can't see the end, the beginning's too far away. So any tips for how do you do that? How do you get everybody pumped again?
I mean, I guess it varies project to project, but I generally chucking in a couple of surprises always works. I think, where you just sort of it's almost like a controlled surprise. Sometimes you might say, right, this is how we're shooting it, this is how, and then almost pretend that a directive has come in to change it or something, and suddenly flip it around, and suddenly people are having to be on their toes a bit more. That sometimes works, but really generally I think it's just about being, if you're being enthusiastic and fun, joking around a bit, and having a smile, not being stressed or sort of quiet, that I find that's quite helpful as well. If as long as you're coming in with boundless energy, then that does sort of reflect onto others a bit.
Yeah, definitely. So the old adage, don't work with kids and animals. So you've done both of those things.
A lot.
A lot of times so somebody might be doing I've seen a few actually, graduation films, and it's got a child actor in it. What would be your tips for working with child performers?
Well, I would say the most important thing is not to talk down to them, not to think that you're dealing with someone who doesn't understand the complexities of what you're doing, or their role isn't significant, or they're not going to do it right, or I don't know. You see also simple things like, depending if they're quite young, don't stand up and talk to them like this, look down at them, just get down to their level and talk to them. Engage with them, and listen to their suggestions and make them feel a part of it. That will really help at the beginning. Then finding the balance between giving them enough information but not giving them too much. Don't over rehearse them, keep it slightly fresh. With younger children, often it's better to not really rehearse at all. Give them, make sure they've got their lines, and then just place them in the scene. And just sort of let them experience it for real for the first time. A lot of I wasn't the director on it, but I was edit producing a kids drama series called Topsy and Tim. And the thing they would do a lot is they would rehearse it or discuss it without the kids there, and they would anticipate where the children would go and make sure they had coverage, and then place them in. And often they would sort of go, okay, well, we want the kids to go to the table, and the scene is going to happen at the table. We're not going to tell them to go to the table. That's where we want them to go. So the best way to do that is put a couple of glasses of orange juice on the table, and they'll go straight to it. We often did that on things like Waffle the Wonder Dog as well. We had to think, right, okay, if we want them sitting at the sofa, let's just put a glass of orange juice at the coffee table. They'll go over, have a sip, sit down, and they're in the position you want them to sit in, without saying, go and sit over there. Because if you tell them to go and sit over there, they'll come on, look, and then and it just doesn't look right.
I can imagine. And then animals, obviously, I'm imagining on the stuff you're working on, you've got a person there who knows what to do with animals. But is that really challenging, or is it a stage now where it's very mechanical? How's it work?
No, it is really challenging, because often the animals are trained quite rightly to obey their handler absolutely to the, and that's so useful. But 90% of the time, that's so useful. But if you're working on shows where the animal is the lead cast almost, or is certainly a crucial cast member, you need them to have a bit more personality sometimes. And them looking to their handler the whole time can be quite tricky, because the handler will be, in the wrong place at the wrong time or something, so it can be really, really difficult. And so I found on the a show I've recently made for Apple, it was based on a farm. There were loads of animals, that actually sometimes it was better to get an animal that was really much less trained. The animal handlers didn't like it that as much, because we'd say, right, we need them to do this, and they'd say, well, you told us not to train it, so don't expect us to we can't guarantee that sheep is going to go from there to there like you want it to. But actually, you would sometimes much more natural performances from animals. They were less trained. So again, it's a similar thing to working with young children. It's finding that balance between the right amount of training, in a way.
And that, talking about the Apple show, all of the Apple stuff, we've got Apple TV, the production value and the quality of it is just, it's on like a next level. Is the secret ingredient money, or what's the kind of, why do they all look so slick and polished? And
money.
So
well, so that Apple show was, it was a next level up for me as well, with budgets, with with budgets come a whole nother level of crew that you wouldn't really work with, people who would never normally dream of working on the types of shows you're working on. will suddenly do it, you know, or like, so the VFX on that Apple show was done by Industrial Light and Magic.
Yeah.
And certainly I would never have been working on Industrial Light and Magic on any of the BBC shows I've done before that, or things like that. So you are suddenly dealing with, you know, much better providers on every level. And so that means it looks better, you know, it just does look better.
And so that show has live animals, children, puppets, and VFX in it. So that sounds like a nightmare to me.
It was definitely challenging. It was really challenging. There were lots of things, you know, and lots of things that none of us knew whether it would work or not. You know, and then we had to sort of all sort of work together. Once it all came together, we all had to start working together to sort of work how to make it work, because sometimes, especially with the animatronic puppetry, it was really difficult to make sure that was, you know, so many technical elements in that you know, we were all aware it was going to be like that. But I don't know, simple things like so the animals, you know, they're all, you know, they've got hundreds of servos in the eyes, the expressions, the mouth, all that, and that's being operated by, you know, people offset with controls, and they're having to get a feed, you know, of the cameras. But if that feed is slightly delayed, or, you know, something goes, then it all falls down. So that was happening all the time, you know, and it was trying to make that reliable, trying to make sure that was all working. And then you know, the servos would overheat and smoke would start coming out of their eyes. You know, it was all that sort of thing. You know, it was just sort of it was a real technical challenge.
I bet. And you that went on to win a BAFTA, is that right?
Yeah.
So I've noticed that on your CV, it's like BAFTA nominated, BAFTA winning, BAFTA. How does that make a huge difference career-wise? Does the phone start ringing after that more, or how does that work?
Well, I was talking to someone the other day, and they said, "Oh, how's work at the moment?" I said, "Oh, it's quite quiet." He said, "Oh, that's the BAFTA shadow." Apparently, apparently after winning a BAFTA, it all goes quiet for a year. But I don't know. No, I don't think it makes too much. I mean, I think it would depend. You know, it was a BAFTA in the Children and Family Awards. If it was BAFTA in the Film Awards, you know, I don't know, it would probably be quite different. But I'm at the moment, I'm moving out of kids and family and into, you know, sort of mainstream scripted TV and film. So that's at the moment for me personally is you know, I don't have any contacts in that world really, so I'm sort of having lots of meetings and things like that. So it's difficult to know really what you know, how that BAFTA might affect me. If I was staying in kids and family, it would probably be quite useful.
Okay. And something I've got to talk about, because we're we were a big brother family. Me and my wife loved it, especially the celebrity ones. So you did a series of that. What was that like? What's it like doing something that's on every single night?
Yeah, so that was really good fun actually. There was it was hard work, much harder work than I expected it to be. There was quite a lot of training in the run up to understand how to do it. And it was great. The position I was in, I was story producer, and it was a really varied and interesting role. You'd be doing things like being the voice in the house.
Oh, right. Cool.
So when you need to sort of announce something, you go in, "This is Big Brother, would you please stop, I don't know, whatever they're doing," or be in the diary room. So you'd be asking them questions in the diary room and talking to the housemates. That was good fun. That was really interesting. Then you'd be doing things like overnight producing. That was really tough, because you'd turn up at 11:30 and you'd take over the gallery from the day producer, and you'd come in, and it was usually at the point where they like stopped serving alcohol, but everyone was completely pissed and arguments were happening. So you sort of walk in, and you've got a frazzled producer going, right, gives you a sheet. This, these are the stories today. This one's finishing. This one's still going, as you can see, but we think, we're going to calm that down. You're going to have to go in the diary room, ask that question to this person and then that story will be complete. And then you got to put them to bed. So you sort of go in and you start the first sort of 2 hours is like completely frantic. And then you start, turning off the lights in the different parts of the house because you just need to get them to bed. And, as soon as you've got the story for the day, you go, right, okay, let's start turning off the lights, get them to bed. They go into bed, you turn off the lights, and then it just goes completely quiet. And you're on until 8 a.m. So you've got to sit there, and then every half an hour, you get the director to, zoom in the camera onto each bed to make sure that they're all there and safe, still breathing and still all that sort of thing. So you're all sitting in the gallery, you're sort of, trying not to nod off because nothing's happening after the sort of frantic first 2 hours. So that was difficult. It was great fun. I mean, there was also I was on the one that the guy from X Factor won it.
Rylan,
yeah.
Rylan.
I was when he won it.
Right.
One of the days, it was my story day, and so it's your story day. You're sitting there watching the quad split. You've got every camera on a big screen, and you're following the story, and then you're feeding into the gallery to ask another producer to call people into the diary room, ask questions on your behalf to sort of bring the story together. And I was really focusing on a particular story and didn't notice Rylan disappear. And it's also your job when you're doing that, just to make sure, just to check everyone's still there. And then I realized, I was like, shit, he's gone. I mean, he's not, and the toilets weren't locked. It's like, he's not in the toilet. And he disappeared. And he was gone for about, and I was like, shit, I'm going to have to tell someone in a minute that he's disappeared, and he's disappeared on my watch, and I don't know where he's gone. I was like, I've got to give it another 5 minutes. And if he's not here, I'm going to have to call it in. I can't remember if I did call it in or not, but it was getting a bit. And then someone went to the food hatch where we deliver. But in the end, they opened it and he was in there. So thank Christ for that. But so I nearly lost him on my producing day.
On your watch. And do you get involved in it? Are you so tired that you can't, and you view them as these kind of, not objects, but are you removed from it, or do you get sucked in? And how do you make sure you're not favouring one person over another with the story?
Well, it's a big team, so your stories that you're going, okay, this is the story we're going with. The execs above you will also, you'll say, this is the story I want to go with, and they'll okay it. I mean, I think you're going in and you go, the big stories from yesterday, what the stories were yesterday. You're going to want to probably bring some of those stories through, especially if it was a dramatic night. The beginning of your day will definitely want to be taken up with some of that, the morning after the night before type thing. So really, I think you're much more driven on the stories, the sort of serial arc, than you are on your own personal sort of preferences. A lot of the people who worked on that show, on those types of shows, really live and breathe reality. They go from that reality show onto the next one, onto the next one, onto the next one, come back to it. You do the rounds. You really. They really love it, and I really enjoyed my time on it, but I did it because I wanted to experience what it was like, but I didn't want to do it again. Not because I didn't like it, just because I've never liked to sort of get typecast into a particular type of genre.
Sure. So again, on this is me doing my research. It said on, I think it was on your agent's site, that you've got your hard of hearing, or you've got your deaf. Is that right? So
Yes, yes.
do you mind me talking about that?
No, absolutely. No,
No. So what's it like having that kind of impairment, and how has that affected you in your career?
So I am completely deaf on my right side and have hearing loss on my left side. Um, it has been difficult at times, especially when I was working in live TV. So you're wearing headphones there. When you're on the floor, often you've got to wear headphones for talkback to hear the gallery. And most people have it on one ear and then have it like that so they can hear what's going on. But obviously I can't do that. I've got no hearing in this ear. And so I would often not hear what was going on in the gallery, and I might get told off. When I was just starting out in the industry, people weren't as accepting as they are now of everyone's differences. So I did used to get told off from time to time for not hearing things. And also at the time, growing up, I was told not to wear hearing aids. I now wear hearing aids.
Yeah.
So, it was about, you've got to learn to adapt to exist in this world with what you've got. And so I missed, I didn't hear loads of things. I mean, it's bizarre now when I think about it. So it was always quite difficult because I didn't wear hearing aids. I wouldn't hear a lot of things. And also by not wearing hearing aids, people wouldn't know that I was hard of hearing. And so they wouldn't be as understanding. They would sort of tell me off. I'd have to say, "Oh, sorry, I'm deaf in this ear. I don't, And then, oh, well, next time, whatever." So it was really tricky. And then, I went back to the NHS, got hearing aids, and it got a lot easier then. I can hear much more, but also I think crucially, it flags to people that, I am hard of hearing. So people tend to be more understanding. I still probably tell people on set at the beginning, just because sometimes, I still, of course, won't hear people, especially if they're on the side that, I don't hear, or if I can't lip read, I'll often be saying, "What was that? What's that?" But I do think it has been a massive benefit as well. Certainly when directing actors for drama, I find that I work a lot more with facial expressions and physical movements. That's how, when I'm talking to someone, I do take in all of that. I probably only hear about 60-70% of what someone's saying to me, but I'm putting the sentence together with how they're moving, their facial expressions, and my brain then puts it all together, and then I realize what they've said. And so when I'm working with actors, I will I'll really see that as well, when they're in their acting, if their facial expressions or their movements don't compute, if it sometimes doesn't feel right, I'm working much more on those things than perhaps I would be if I was if I had full hearing in both ears. So I do see it as a real benefit.
Thanks for listening. If you want all the behind the scenes information that's going to help you with a career in a creative industry, then please do subscribe.